All right, we still got a few out there while they're filtering in. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get started though because it's time. And let's go ahead and start this morning off with a prayer, okay? Bow with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for all the wonderful things that you've given us and letting us wake up this morning, come together and learn a little bit more about your word. Help us to take something out of these words that we are reading from Joshua today and be able to put it in our lives and take it forward with us through the rest of this week and help us to think about you and your Son as we do it. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Okay. So if you haven't been here with us the last couple of weeks, we've been going through Joshua, the book of Joshua. We started off in chapter 1, and it's been a couple weeks now, and we're still only in chapter 7 today. So if you haven't gotten through the first several chapters with us, Joshua became the leader of Israel after Moses died. He died in the desert, and Joshua was promoted. Now Joshua has the task of taking the children of Israel into the land of Egypt, and he's done the crossing of the Jordan. He crossed the Jordan River with them, and the Lord stood the waters up, and they all moved over. And I'm going to go ahead and correct myself because I believe a couple weeks back I said they only brought the fighting men, and I was wrong. So we'll talk about that here. We've got evidence that it was not just the fighting men here in chapter 7. So I was mistaken. I went back and I reread the passage I used in Numbers to say, Numbers 32. That's talking about the tribes of Reuben and see if I can. Reuben and Gad, you see there. You can see at the very top right, the blue and the purple. They were on the other side of the Jordan. So Numbers 32 is talking about the tribes of Reuben and Gad. Thanks. Right here. So this is the Jordan River. Gad and Reuben are going to be on the right side or the far side of the Jordan River. And Numbers 32 is talking about the tribes of Reuben and Gad sent over their fighting men with the rest of the children of Israel while their family stayed on the east side. I mistook that for that being all of the women and children stayed on the east side, and it's not true. It was just the women and children of Gad and Reuben. Okay? So we did have all of the children of Israel cross over the Jordan, plus the men from Gad and Reuben. And then last week, we talked about Jericho and what they did to Jericho, the total destruction that happened there, the walls falling down. And this week, we're following up, okay? So the children of Israel have just conquered Jericho. And the last thing we read in chapter 6 is that the people of Canaan are afraid. Naturally, they should be, right? The Israelites have conquered a very fortified city in less than 7 days of siege, which at that time period was completely unheard of and an astounding feat. Whether or not the people of Canaan had heard of how the siege was conquered by the walls just crumbling in front of the children of Israel isn't certain. But even if that wasn't relayed properly, right? Even if they didn't know exactly how the children of Israel had conquered Jericho, they knew that they had, and they knew how long it took them to do it, which would have been just a week. And like we said last week, the siege warfare had not been very well developed at this point in the Bronze Age, so there would have been no easy way for the children of Israel to conquer Jericho without the help of God. So the people of Canaan were very aware and very afraid that God was with the children of Israel and helping them take the land. So let's get started here in chapter 7, verse 1. But the people of Israel broke faith in regard to the devoted things for Achan. For Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things, and the anger of the Lord burned against the people of Israel. So if you guys remember back in chapter 6, verses 18 and 19, we had Joshua, right before the children of Israel charged into Jericho, he gave them a bunch of commands, right? He said, shout to the Lord, this is what we are going to do to the city. He described to them everything they should do, everything they were going to destroy, everything they weren't going to destroy, everything they were not going to take, and the things that were supposed to be devoted to the Lord. Now, devoted here, our English word's not very clear or very, I guess, singular as it is in the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, it's devoted as in a sacrifice. So like if you were to take, your youngest, your best lamb, right, and you were to devote that, it would be to set it to the side, that is for sacrifice. That is my sacrificial lamb. And here, the word devoted is the same way, okay? So that devotion of these things is to as a sacrifice to God. So to take something that is devoted here would be pretty egregious, right? It's practically stealing from God. And that's one of the reasons why here in verse 1, we see it brought up that the anger of the Lord was burning hot against Israel. So moving further down here, we're going to verse 2. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai as spies, okay? Now, we've seen this already, right? He sent spies to Jericho. Now, what does this mean? So, this kind of took me by surprise, right? They've just come into the land of Canaan, and they've just conquered Jericho with this mighty fell swoop, right? With that God helped them do. They watched the walls crumble before them. And Joshua sent spies before he had taken command. Okay, we talked about that chapter 1 and 2 should be flipped chronologically. So he had sent those spies before, but now they're in Canaan, and they've seen the power of God on display, and they know that God is with them. So why did he send spies out? That's a question for you guys. Anybody?
They did. That's part of the warfare.
Right. But you've been told by God that he is going to take care of you.
He's going to take care of you. You don't know how, and you need to see what's going on before you get there so that you know what to do. God says, I'll take care of you, but in this case, he didn't say, walk around the wall 7 times and blow your horn. He said, just take it. And they were like, okay, so we have to go see what's going on before we do that.
Okay. If you guys couldn't hear what she said, or for the people that are watching on live stream, she said that they didn't know how God was going to do it. God hadn't told them yet what to do. And I think it's a very important thing, at least I had to reread it a couple times before I got it. I'm a little thick. But for us as Christians, right, we're told that God is going to take care of us and that God is watching out for us. That doesn't mean that we can just, run headlong into life not thinking about anything we're going to do. We gotta think about what we're going to do. We got to use our skills that God's given us, our gifts, right? And God's given Joshua this gift of being a great leader, okay? And one of the things that he was taught either by Moses or by God, or just one of the gifts that he had naturally, was to be cautious, okay? He's already sent these spies out one time, and here again we see him do it again, and it's because he's using the gifts that God has given him as a leader to not just dive headlong into something without knowing what's going on, okay? So he sends these spies out to Ai, and they come back in verses 3 and 4, and they say, we can take this city no problem, right? They just conquered Jericho. They're feeling pretty good about themselves, okay? They see Ai, and they're like, this is nothing. These guys are a bunch of hicks living out in the woods, okay? We only need about 3,000 guys. They had 40,000 at Jericho, okay? They had all of their fighting men there. So they think they need about 3 to take on Ai. So Joshua says, okay, we'll send 3,000. And that's what they do. So verse 5, they send about 3,000 men out there, and 36 die. And then they turn tail and run for the hills. Okay? Now for me, this is another kind of, red flag, right? When we're talking about how God is blessing the children of Israel, it's never very specific, right, of how he's blessing, other than the fact that they win pretty dramatically. It doesn't tell us how, or casualty reports or anything like that. Like we get with modern warfare, we know how many people were casualties in this battle and that battle. We don't get that here in the Bible that often, especially in some of these earlier accounts, right? We hear about how many the children of Israel may have slaughtered, or who the victor, how many they slaughtered, but we rarely hear the victor's casualty report. So for us to have this perspective is kind of unique as far as just historically, just if we're not talking about the Bible in general. It's kind of unique to have the historical perspective of what the casualty report is. And the fact that they lost 36 men and then were afraid, to me, says that was unusual, right? That was not the normal thing that happened when the children of Israel went into battle. When you go into battle, in this time period, you're going to expect to lose people, right? You're just fighting with swords. It's going to happen. Somebody's going to be better than fighting with a sword than you are. So you would expect a pretty dramatic amount of casualties in this kind of conflict, and to just lose 36 out of 3,000 before you decide it's time to head home is not that many, right? It's less than 1%. I think it's less than 0.1%, really. But we're talking about how many people you're losing. 36 is not that many out of 3,000. And honestly, most generals, most commanders wouldn't even take notice of that, right? 36 people fell on the field. That's just keep on going. But the children of Israel notice, and they turn tail and run. So I think it's very evident of how benevolent God has been with blessing them in their conquest, right? It implies that in Jericho they didn't lose a single man, to me. Because if they lost 36 and turned tail, it's a pretty big red flag. So they run from the battle, and the people at Ai feel pretty good about that, right? The people that just conquered Jericho came to attack us, and we made them run away. That's a pretty big morale boost, okay? And the children of Israel, after running away, come back to Joshua, and they tell him what happened. I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. So 36 men, right? What does this mean? 36 is 3 times 12. And if any of you guys have read the Bible long enough, you know that numbers kind of play a big role in messages and in the ways they describe things, okay? A lot of times we see 7 around. 3 is the number that represents God or deity, very commonly in the Bible. And 12 is often representative of the children of Israel, right? So this 3 times 12 could be representative of God being opposed to, or God having something to do with the children of Israel, like, hey, there's something wrong here with the children of Israel and God. Like, these two numbers are here together, and that's why maybe that they're wanting to try and find out what's going on here. Okay? So when they come back, Joshua falls down, rips his clothes, and the whole camp goes into mourning. This type of mourning is very dramatic, and it would be very powerful to witness. I mean, it's not something they're going to do quietly, okay? So Joshua falls down on his face and calls out to God. He falls down before the ark of the Lord. And all the elders put dust on their heads. Joshua asked, "Alas, O Lord God, why have you brought these people over to Jordan at all, to give us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? Would that we have been content to dwell beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can we say when Israel's turned their backs before their enemies, before the Canaanites, and all the inhabitants of the lands will hear it and surround us and cut us off from the name of the earth? And what will you do for your great name?" Okay, so Joshua is getting kind of bold here, he's asking God, why did you even bother sending us here if you're not going to help us conquer the rest of the land, right? They've got Jericho, but they're just got their toe right here on the first step of it. And they try to get a little bit of more, and it seems like they're not getting any progress, right? God's not with them. So Joshua's questioning God, why is this the case if you were just going to give us Jericho? To me, if you want to pull that back up, this last verse here is very important, and it's kind of crazy the way he words this. I don't know if it's the same way for you guys. And what will you do for your great name? That's pretty confident right there, talking to God. He's asking God, what will you do for your great name? That's very bold to me, right? He's sitting here, he's asking God, what are you going to do about this? And God's pretty quick to correct him here in verse 10. Right? He tells to get up and stop pouting. That there's somebody in the camp of Israel who has taken something that was devoted, who is stolen from God, and that is why he's angry with the children of Israel. Okay, so God tells them what he's going to do. Here in the next coming verses, he's telling him that you've got to go out and cast lots. Okay, you're going to cast lots. You're going to find the tribe, and then you're going to cast lots, and you're going to find the family that's responsible for all of this. He says there's just one, right? There's just one guy who's done this, that's caused this problem. So that's what Joshua does. He gets up the next morning, and they cast lots in verses 10 through 12 here. And then they find Achan, okay? Achan's the guy who's taken it. And Joshua comes up to him and he asks him, Achan, what have you done? Tell me what you did. Because God knows what you did, but I don't, right? He doesn't say it exactly like that, but tell me what you have done, and we'll see what you've done, and we'll correct it, right? So Achan tells him in verse 20, and Achan answered Joshua, truly I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I did. So here Achan admits, he's like, I know I screwed up, right? I'm the one that did it. I know I sinned. And here's what I did. So he just tells them, when I saw among the spoil a beautiful cloak of Shinar, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and I took them. And see, they're hidden in the earth inside my tent with the silver underneath. Okay? So, not only here does he admit that he knew he did badly, right? But Joshua told him before what they should and shouldn't take, what they should and shouldn't do in Jericho. He knew beforehand. And the fact that he took it and he hid it in the ground beneath his tent is a pretty big indicator here that he knew he was doing something wrong, right? He just thought he could get away with it. So he took this stuff and he hid it in a pretty hard to find place, right? Somebody's got to take his tent and move it, and then they got to dig in the ground to find it there, okay? So that's what they do. They go to his tent and they check. And to me, these numbers, shekels, are meaningless. I didn't live back when shekels were used as a measurement. Shekels are about 2/5 of an ounce. So here he's got about 80 ounces of silver and about 20 ounces of gold. And now we're talking ounces, but I still don't know what that means, right? Okay. So this is not what it would have been worth in their time, right? I don't really know what that would have been. But today, if you had 80 ounces of gold, that'd be about $2,400. I'm sorry, 80 ounces of silver would be about $2,400 worth of silver, okay? If you had 20 ounces of gold, that would be about $46,000 worth of gold, $46,700, give or take, okay? So that's a pretty good lump of money, right? Just laying around. So you can see how that would be tempting. You know, it's not like he just grabbed a couple earrings and a cloak. So he saw, you know, Steve?
This supports or reinforces what God's always said. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap.
Yeah. He's definitely going to be reaping it.
The reason he blessed the Israelites was contingent on their obedience.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, we might be tempted to think that he had owned up to it, but I wouldn't put a whole lot of thought into that, because he didn't own up to it until he was found out.
Yeah.
It's not like his conscience got to him and he came before the battle and said,
No.
I've done this, we need to make it right. He didn't do that.
Right. No, I'm sorry if I implied that. He definitely did not voluntarily come forward. It was like they cornered him, basically, right? They cornered him by lot and saying, hey, we know you did it. What did you do, right? We know you did something. We just don't know what you did. And yeah, when I was saying that, it's just he knew that he did something wrong. That's why he hid it. And, you know, if he wanted to come forward with it, he wouldn't have hid it, right? So he took about $50,000 worth of stuff, right? Or $50,000 worth of belongings that was supposed to go to God. We see some similar stories, some similar things that happen like this in the Bible too. We talked about it in our class in Acts, right? Ananias and Sapphira, they sold their land, and they came and brought that as brought some of it, a portion of it, as an offering to Peter, and tried to keep some for themselves and say that they brought the whole thing. So it's a very similar picture here we're seeing from Ananias and Sapphira and Joshua, okay? That he kind of took some of what he was going to give to the Lord, what he was supposed to give to the Lord, for himself, and try to keep it secret. And God didn't take too kindly to that. Okay, so what are we going to do with Achan? Well, God already told Joshua that he was supposed to burn him and everything in his house. Now, I don't know if Joshua knew a little bit more about that than I did, but they do stone them first, okay? So they take Achan, they take his whole family, and they stone them, and then they pile everything he's got into a big old heap and set it on fire, okay? So him, everything that he owned, his house, his tent, his sheep, his oxes, all of his food, everything, okay? They pile it up and they burn it, and then they piled a bunch of stones on top of it to make sure no one could ever get anything from that, right? If they had any jewelry or gold or silver or anything like that on them or in their chests or trunks or scattered around, nobody wanted anything to do with it. Okay, so they buried it up, covered it up with stones so that nothing could get taken out of that pile. And that's called the Valley of Achor, which in Hebrew is to mean trouble. Now, I'm not sure if that was a rebranding of his name to mean trouble, or if it meant that before and it's just kind of similar in English. But they call it the Valley of Achor. And at the time of the writing of Joshua, that was still piled up there. Les?
I don't know if I'm taking too much license here, but when I look at this, if I add to what Steve said, what you sow, you reap.
Mm-hmm.
So if I bring that to today, to myself personally, and maybe to other people in this auditorium, if I'm not living the way I should be, I may be causing somebody else to stumble and they could lose their soul. Come judgment day, I'm going to have to answer for that. Okay? So it's not just ourselves when we're trying to do the right thing. And none of us are perfect. We stumble. But in general, if you're trying to do the right thing, it tends to gravitate people toward you to wonder what's going on. But even within our families, as a mother or father, if we've stumbled enough in some of our family even to lose their souls. All I'm saying is, like Steve said, you reap what you sow, but in this case, you look at the whole family paid. They didn't do it, but they paid. And so, if I bring that to today, again, not just repeat, but we have some responsibilities for how other people go.
I agree. So for those of you who couldn't hear or on the live stream, Les said that this is a prime example of the phrase, what you sow, you reap. And the fact that he was affected, but not only him, but the people around him were affected. It's just, another example of why we should be living the way Christ wanted us to live. If you're sinning, it's not only affecting you, it's affecting everyone around you, even if you don't think it is. Not only his family left, but the 36 guys that got killed, fighting in Ai. They had no idea. And they were just, innocent victims of Achan's sin here. So your sins have consequences even if you can't see them. Even if you don't know. There's going to be a consequence for it. Whether it's you, whether it's somebody else that pays the price, whether it's both of you, right? There's always a price for that. And, as Christians, we know our price has already been paid with the blood of Christ. But there's other consequences, too, on top of that. So the children of Israel don't want anything to do with Achan, his family, or his belongings. And they bury him, and they call it the Valley of Achor. So we still have Ai to deal with, right? Chapter 8, we've got to go back. So the Lord tells them how to do it. Now, this is one of my favorite parts, because we see in Jericho, the Lord give him instructions to put his power on display, right? To let them know, this is not you that's fighting this battle, it's me doing it. I'm doing all the legwork here, you're just kind of running around. So here he gives them more what you would seem to be a standard tactical plan, right? They're setting up an ambush, okay? They went up there with 3,000 guys last time and got their tails handed to them. So he says, you take everybody else that we didn't send last time, and you set them up behind to the west of the town, okay? You go up there with 5,000 guys, like you came back with reinforcements, right? You thought 3,000 wasn't enough, we'll get it done with 5,000 this time. So you go out there like you're going to fight them again, and they're going to feel so confident that they made you run last time, they're just going to come out and try and fight you in the plains. And then you're going to send all the rest of the troops in and burn the town behind them, okay? So here in chapter 8, he starts off, he tells Joshua what to do, and Joshua, verse 3, Joshua hears this, what God tells him to do, and Joshua does it. Okay, that's something we're going to see over and over here. Joshua doesn't beat around the bush. He doesn't play games. When God tells him to do something, he does it. Here we'll see the next day or in the morning, right? Joshua doesn't waste time. He doesn't think about it. He doesn't pray anymore because God's told him what to do. He doesn't need any extra help. And he tells the children of Israel that what they're going to do, and they do it. Okay? So we see Joshua tells the children of Israel what to do here in verses 3 through 8 in chapter 8. And verses 9 through 16 is them enacting this plan. Okay? So they do exactly what God tells them to do. They take 30,000 men. I lost my place. They took 30,000 men and they put them on the west side of the city, okay? And then Joshua takes the 5,000 fighting force he's got out into the plains below the city to lure the fighting men out of Ai. And it works, right? So they set up camp there, they spend the night, and the children of Ai come out to fight them early in the morning. They're trying to surprise them, right, in the plains and scare them off again. And that's exactly what they pretend to do, right? Joshua, as soon as they start fighting, they head for the hills. And the children of Ai chase after them. Now, the king of Ai is not completely stupid. He did leave some guys in the city to defend it, but they get so excited seeing him running off in the distance, they say, hey, we're going to chase after him too. So all the fighting men that were left in the city decide they want a piece of the action, and they start chasing off after him too. So you got the guys who went out to fight him to start with chasing him. You got the reserve group that chased him, and now there's nobody left to defend the city. It's wide open. So the 30,000 men come in, they burn the city, and they do it pretty quickly because when the men that are fighting in the plains turn around to see the smoke, they know that they're in trouble, right? Their stronghold is no longer strong or somewhere they can go back to defend, right? They've got nowhere to go back to that's safe. And then they're completely destroyed. They're in the plain. Joshua then turns back, stops running. They fight him there and they kill all of them. This is another example of Joshua fulfilling what God told him to do, right? He utterly destroyed everything that he was told to. And the casualty report here in verses 24 and 25, I know I skipped a lot down here. In verses 24 and 25, it talks about how many, about 12,000 men and women from Ai were killed, okay? And they would have killed all the oxes and sheep and everything and just plundered the same thing, right? The gold and silver and all the valuables would have gone to the Lord, okay? And this time, they actually did it, right? Nobody took a little something extra on the side. They learned their lesson, okay? So they've completely wiped out Ai. And it's really just a testament to how the children of Israel, even though they are kind of hard to get the lesson, eventually they do figure it out, right? Not for long, but hey, we're the same way too, right? We give the children of Israel a really hard time, but I don't know when I was a kid how many times I had to be told something twice. If it got told a third time, it wasn't getting said. So the children of Israel learned their lesson, right? They do what God tells them to do, and then they're rewarded for it by God showing them his blessings and by continuing to be with them in the rest of their campaign. Yes, sir.
One of the lessons that I think that we could possibly take from this, I ask myself the question, how could they possibly avoided the initial defeat in Ai? How could that possibly have been avoided? And it doesn't appear like they inquired of God about how to do this. It was like, well, we depend on God on the big things like Jericho. This is a small thing, we got this.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's like we can do this ourselves. We don't really need God to do it.
I think you're right. And I think, God would have been with them if they hadn't have had Achan's sin, right?
Revealed to them ahead of time, you got a problem, don't even try to do it.
Right. I think they definitely were punished because they jumped the gun a little bit. They didn't ask God first. And that's one of the things that it could have been way worse too if Joshua hadn't been as cautious as he was, right? If they'd have sent the whole camp up there, it could have been way worse. So it's definitely a testament to, the choices that we make can directly lead us to or away from the right decision, the right path, right? If they had started off, asking God, hey, what are we going to do? God might not have said anything, and that would have been a red flag right there, because he's telling them what to do. He's leading them step by step how to get this done. So when he's not helping you, you got to fix something. We also see here at the end of the chapter, verses 30 through 35, Joshua renews Israel's covenant with God. Okay, they've been through a few scrapes and bruises. And I think Joshua wants to kind of send the message to Israel, hammer it home, drive the nail in. Hey, we're here to make good on our promise with God, right? He's making good on his promise for us. We got to hold up our end of the bargain. And I think he kind of wanted to make sure everybody knew the rules, right? We see here that he builds this altar. They make the sacrifices and the peace offering. And then he takes the time and he reads the entire law, every word that Moses ever wrote, to the children of Israel. He didn't leave a word out, okay? He's sitting them down and he's giving them a lecture. You guys goofed this up in Jericho. We did okay here, but there's no excuses from here on out, right? He's telling them he spells it out word for word, everything Moses ever told him, everything that God told him, that Moses relayed to him, everything about the desert, the times in the desert, the history, all of the things God did for him, all the things that he said, all the things they did badly that they wrote down for an example later, all the sins they committed in the desert. He read it to him, okay, word for word. I don't really want to do that this morning, but if you want to start in Genesis, I'm sure you could make it to the end of Deuteronomy it seems like you got it done in a day. So if you want to start at breakfast, you'd probably be done by dinner, okay? So that's what he does. He sets them down. He gives them a lecture because they weren't listening the first time. And I think they get the message the second time because we don't see this happen again, right? This is kind of a one-off as far as the children of Israel's failure while Joshua is alive. I'll put that end cap on it because it's not their last failure, but it's certainly the last one while Joshua is at the helm. We don't see him have this kind of scuff up again. And I think it's partially to the diligence of Joshua here, reminding them, everything that they should have already known, right? Everything they've forgotten. Sets it down and spells it out. And sometimes we need that too, right, as Christians. That's one of the reasons why we've got a copy that we can have right in front of us. We don't have any excuse. The children of Israel really didn't have an excuse, but we definitely don't because we could read our copy every day. They didn't have it right in front of them. They had to have, and half of them couldn't read anyway, right? They had to have someone read it to them to be able to get the message. Now, they shouldn't have been forgetting the message. That's on them. But we definitely don't have any excuses of why we're forgetting, okay? It's right here in front of us. We can read it every day. We should be reading it every day. But I think that's just another example, another way that God's showing us the trick to getting it right? Just keep it right here in front of you. Read it every day. And you'll know what you're supposed to do. Even if you choose not to do it, you'll know what you're supposed to do. So verses 30 through 35, Joshua renews the covenant with Israel. Anybody have any questions about this so far? I know we covered kind of chapter 8 really quick here. I see a hand or something scratched. Okay. So Joshua renews the covenant here with Israel. Moving on to chapter 9. We thought we were out of the woods, right? Chapter 9. So as soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan in the hill country and the lowlands along the coast and the great sea of Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of this, they gathered together as one to fight the children of Israel. So they've given up trying to fight them one-on-one, right? They've seen them conquer 2 good cities here back to back. They're ready to fight, okay? They've got to make a big show in here to try and destroy the children of Israel. And I think some of this was probably the hand of God helping them out a little bit. It's a lot less tiresome to fight everybody at once and just get it over with than it is to fight them one at a time 30 times, right? So whether by divine influence or whether they're just scared and that's their last hope, right? I think it was a little bit of divine influence. But all of these people decide to unite against the children of Israel to see if they can just beat them once and for all. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard about what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they, on their part, acted with cunning and went and made ready provisions, and took worn-out sacks for their donkeys, wineskins, worn out, torn, and mended, with worn-out and patched sandals on their feet, and worn-out clothes, and all their provisions were dry and crumbly. And they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, and said to him and the men of Israel, "We've come from a distant country, so now make a covenant with us." But the men of Israel said to the Hivites, "Perhaps you live among us. How can we make a covenant with you?" Then they said to Joshua, "We are your servants." And Joshua said, "Who are you? Where have you come from?" So we started off here. They made themselves look dingy. Okay? They put on their worst of everything they had, right? Their holy sandals, not holy sandals. Their sandals with holes in them. Their dirty clothes, their beat up rags, the stuff that you'd rip up and make your car washing rags, or your dirty cleaning stuff up rags, you're right. They took everything that looked really, really gross and worn out and torn up. They took all the worst food, their moldy bread, their crumbly provisions. I mean, I don't know what a dry and crumbly provision looks like, but it doesn't sound good. They made themselves look like they'd been wandering and hadn't had any kind of resources for quite a while, right? They looked like the children of Israel did, okay? Wandered around in the desert. That was what they did. I don't know if they borrowed the old stuff they left behind or what, but they made themselves look all nappy and wandering, okay, to put on a good show. They're trying to trick them. And they go and they talk to Joshua here at the camp. And Joshua starts off pretty good here. He says, "Well, what if you actually live here? Who are you? Where are you from?" He doesn't just send it right away. He doesn't agree. You don't trick him right off the bat, but he starts off his regular cautious self. And they start wearing him down though. They said, verse 9, "From a distant country your servants have come because of the name of the Lord your God. For we heard a report of him and all that he did in Egypt, and all he did to the two kings of the Amorites and beyond the Jordan, and Sihon the king of Heshbon, and to Og the king of Bashan, who lived at the Asheroth. So our elders and all the inhabitants of our country said, 'Take provisions in your hand for the journey, go and meet them.' And they said to them, 'It was still warm when we took it from our house, as our food for the journey on this day were new, and we filled them, and behold, they've burst. The garments and the sandals on our worn feet are worn on our feet from the long journey.' And so the men took their provisions, but did not ask counsel of the Lord. And Joshua made peace with them, and made a covenant with them, and let them live." Okay, so here we have it, right? Joshua did the messing up this time, okay? He's got no one else to blame. So they come here and they say, "We heard all of these great things about the Lord, right? And we wanted to come and see what all he's done." And they had heard all of the great things that the Lord has done, right? They were the ones that were afraid of him. They heard what he had done in Jericho and Ai and out in the desert. So they had this great report. They had all the inside news, if you will, to deceive the children of Israel here, to deceive Joshua. And, the big, important red letter one, verse 14. "So the men took some of their provisions, but did not ask counsel from the Lord." They forgot to ask God again, right? We just talked about it. They forgot to ask God when they went to take Ai. They forgot to ask God when they're talking to these people. They just kind of forget. And we got to not forget, right? We got to take the time. Oh, I'm running way over here. We got to take the time to ask the Lord first, okay? If you're going to take anything out of this lesson this week, pray. Ask God. If you're going to do something, even if it's driving to work, just talk to God about it, It's not going to hurt anything. It's going to help you. And that's what it is here. If you're going to do something, ask God about it first, because he might have something to say about it, right? Ask God about it and then read your Bible. Pray about it and then read your Bible. That's the two things we're going to take out from today. Because that's the two things they didn't do. And we see where it got them, right? We'll pick up back in chapter 9 next week. Thank you guys for listening.